Thank you very, very much. You want to hear from Chuck. I want you to hear from Chuck. So I'm going to say almost nothing at this point, and just take the pleasure in introducing him to share with you the same messages that we started to share at the World Cafe last year, and that have inspired many OMSSA members, including myself, since then, in terms of the possibilities of an international model that we can absorb as the next tool in excellent service system management. You have read the flyers, you know the arguments, and as I said, because we're running short on time, it'll be Chuck's time to share with you why this work is so important and why the United Nations is so excited and keen on OMSSA's involvement. They see what we can do, and by that I mean OMSSA as a proxy for all that you do as service system managers, as an incredible sort of cusp moment to do things differently and make a difference. And we love it because we know it'll enhance your role on your daily mandated responsibilities and on your commitment to creating healthier and more well-being in your communities. The one thing I will say is if you haven't yet signed a pledge form and you feel comfortable doing it when this is done, please do so. It helps build our mailing list. I'm going to share them with the United Nations in our application, and you will get a fabulous free mouse pad because that's, I know, what you're dying to go home with. So on to Chuck, and I will tell you who he is. I have a card so I can get it absolutely right. Mr. Charles Hopkins, he's the UNESCO Chair in Education for Sustainable Development, and as I said, he is here to inspire us.
Great. Well, thank you so very, very much for allowing me to be part of your vision and looking into the future. And what I want to do is to present a bit of an idea, and hopefully some of you will join us in building a bridge between some of the voiceless people in our communities and the United Nations, in building into that bigger picture. And I'd like to start this morning by sort of building upon what Samantha Nutt talked about yesterday. Now, the one thing I felt a little insecure listening to Samantha yesterday. I mean, first of all, what a fantastic speaker. But the good thing that I have going for me is that at least I'm not a middle-aged man in a suit. Let me begin the picture. Here we go. The picture with what is happening right now at the UN. In 2015 is a really crucial watershed. The Millennium Development Goals have come to an end. We're struggling now with what will be the new vision for the world. We will still work with sustainable development. In itself, is somewhat difficult to grasp. The development, many people take it as growth, but that isn't the original intent. The first mechanical clock was about 3 meters by 3 meters by 3 meters. And then it got into something like this. Yeah, I still wear a wristwatch. And then, of course, now it's a part of a chip in a cell phone and so on. So that's miniaturization, but still that cell phone has coltan. So it becomes really, really difficult to try and sort things out. And although people are meeting and the senior world leaders are gathering and negotiating and so on, still we have huge issues. It was interesting to hear the newcomer strategy. This is North Africa. These are people trying to make their way to the Mediterranean, hopefully to get a boat, hopefully to get into Europe and disappear. Some of them may end up here. Not everyone who comes to Canada has $100,000 to invest, you know, because those are the ones that you meet and the ones that you work with. There are huge social issues, of course, in the world. We also have the environmental issues that are tremendous. This is the North Atlantic in the year 1900. And if you look, you can see those areas, the red, where we were able to get more than 11 tons of fish per square kilometer. Look at the Grand Banks. You know, that was the heart of it. But you can see off the coast of Portugal, off the coast of France, very, very rich fishing. Then came the war, first, and then the second. And of course, we were devastated, no protein, and so the world advised that nations should go to the sea, and there's plenty of free protein. So in the year 2000, this is what the North Atlantic looks like. Globally, we've reduced the fish population by 80%, and our solution is to find better fish finders. We haven't fished for cod off Newfoundland since '92. Is that a social issue? Is it an environmental issue? Is it an economic issue? Yeah, it's all three, and you can't sort them out. And this is what we're realizing, that sustainable development can't be solved by any one group. This is something where we need to collectively look at trying to untangle that cobweb that is there. You know, we're constantly trying to figure out, what do we need? You know, Gandhi's great line about there's enough for everyone's need, just not everyone's greed, anyone's greed, and so on. And trying to figure this out. So one of the definitions that I love, there's the UN definition of sustainable development, about development that meets the needs of future generations without impinging upon see, I even get mixed up. The needs, development that meets the needs of the present generation without limiting future generations. I've been involved in this. I presented to the Brundtland Commission in 1986. I still get confused. So what I use is the line from an indigenous elder in Africa. Sometimes indigenous people have neat ways of saying things. And he said, well, it's enough for all, forever. And so that whole concept of for all, engaging more than people, it's for all on the planet. So it's a lovely way of summing it up. And any age, any group, talking about what is enough for all forever. In the Scandinavian countries, we went a little different, because they thought in a northern, it made wonderful sense in a developing country, but in a northern context, enough sounded like stuff. And so they shifted to well-being for all, forever. And I think that fits in more with OMSSA. And that's the one that I think we would love to use. So it becomes very, very complicated again, because as we start looking at what is enough, yes, it's not just the coltan in the cell phone or our other electronics. There are 4 main depots in the world where our electronic waste goes. This little child you see surrounded by wires, all those wires have been separated out. This is in China. And they will sleep in a tent in the middle of those wires, and during the night they will burn the wires. And they will burn the plastic. It's a way, instead of stripping them, they simply burn them. What is our role in that? So we have social, environmental, and economic issues that are moving on, and we get so frustrated because there seems to be so little happening really at that big level. But the good news is at the community level. See, at the big picture level, it's negotiations from country to country, and whatever they agree upon, they have to come back and get it approved in their own governments and parliament. And they will face the opposition, who will say, well, you gave away this and you gave away that, and so on. So it's largely at a stalemate. But at the community level, it's not negotiating. It's being crafty. It is being wise. It is being collaborative. And it is improving things within our own. Now, I started with those international ones, but I know from listening to you last night, every one of you have your own stories and your own pictures from your own communities that you can put in around social, environmental, and economic issues that are there. And this relationship, if we can build many, many communities working, then if you get enough communities, they will shift the province, the state. And provinces and states will shift countries. And so this is a strategy that we're working on, trying to build up at the same time and giving support to senior leaders. I love this one. It's from Portland. It's a bit of a reverse on, but if we're going to save people around the world, we also have to engage the whole planet. We can't just leave it at the local level. We have to figure out ways of moving back and forward. And so getting back to this idea that 2015 is extremely important, Ban Ki-moon in September of this year will be the new vision for the next 15 to 20 years of the planet and what we are going to do around sustainable development. And Ban Ki-moon, the Secretary General, has pointed out, I think it's a lovely statement, there is no plan B. There's no planet B. So we have to work with what we have. And one of the things that he has sorted out and focused upon is the idea of linking education. Now, and he says formal, non-formal, and informal. Quite often when we work around the concept of education for sustainable development, immediately comes to mind children in schools. That is not what we mean at the UN level. I've been working with this, as I say, since the 1980s and was one of the authors of a chapter in Agenda 21 on this whole thing. What we meant by education is that whole learning process from early childhood, lifelong learning, and so on. And I want to come back to that. This is about all aspects, formal, non-formal, the kinds of brochures, the kind of coaching you do as you visit families. All of this is really what we are talking about. We talked in this was in the late 1980s. 10 of us from around the world were pulled in to write the chapter on education, public awareness, and training. And the idea was so simple. If we want a more sustainable future, what are the means of getting there? One of them is basing things on good, sound science. Another is technology transfer. Another is sustainable production and consumption. But one of the crucial ones that was identified was using the world's education systems, using the world's public awareness systems to increase understanding so that you could actually get public support for politicians moving in that direction. We find around the world that most politicians, we think of them as leaders, but often they're followers. The goal of most governments is not good governance. That's a byproduct. Most of the goal is staying in power. So they're not going to get too far out in front. I mentioned earlier Napoleon's wonderful line about leadership is to never get so far out in front of your troops that you'll be perceived as the enemy. Right? So politicians know where it's safe. Well, this year we're working on, and moving. So what we really need to do is to build that ground support and that groundswell to get it up. What Alf was saying about how do you get the good news messages out into the community, that is all extremely important. So this is an important component, and just to look at it a little bit further, what we did is we said there are 4 main areas we want to work on. The first one was access and retention in quality lifelong learning. One of the 10 of us, he was the president of Princeton University, and he said, what we really need are good recycling programs. That will do it. And fortunately, I didn't open my mouth because I may have supported him. Instead, the president of the University of Cairo said, I have over 500,000 children who are really good at recycling. What they need is an education. These were the children living in the dumps of Cairo, and so on. So what we really, there are still 75 million children, we think, in the world, most of them girls, for whom there is no school today. There's just nothing. And we have hundreds of millions who are in an education system that is inappropriate for them. Still, right? So that's the first one. The second one, though, is reorienting our existing education systems from a goal of development to a goal of sustainable development. And that is something we really don't know how to do. We're learning, we're shifting, we're trying, we're moving. It's our most educated countries that are leaving the deepest ecological footprints on the planet and are often creating some of the greatest social inequities and social injustices in the world. So simply passing on the education systems of the North with those values and ethics and skills and what is success and so on, passing that on to the rest of the world is not the answer. It'll be good for development, but not sustainable development. The next 2, though, are where we really fit in as OMSSA. The whole idea of building public awareness and understanding, the knowledge, skills, values, those kinds of things to actually live in a more sustainable way and to build more sustainable communities. What are the knowledge and skills that you impart every time you visit someone, every time you're involved, when you're writing policy, those things about raising children, those issues around looking after what little income you have, right? About sharing, about caring, about building in the community. This whole idea of building public awareness and understanding is so important. Think of the existing programs you already have going, the brochures, the public service announcements, those kinds of things that are there. How can we work together to build a coherent message that comes from school, from formal education, from non-formal education, from NGOs, from government agencies, from faith-based groups? How do we build and align and get, and that's where I'm going. Training, as I mentioned, is a huge one that we haven't been able to really engage. I saw the statistics in the United States. More money is spent on corporate training, which includes conferences, but corporate training, than is spent in public education. It is a huge amount of money, and what we need is to engage that as well. Now, just emerging last November in Aichi, Nagoya, in Japan, we had the largest gathering ever of ministers of education who, in the declaration, said that we resolve to embed education for sustainable development. That's that broad, what I've said, those 4 aspects, and into all aspects of education. And in doing so, in this global action program that is being rolled out, of which we're inviting OMSSA to take a major role within the UN in doing it, there are 5 areas that we will be working in. The first one is advancing policy. The second one is transforming learning and training environments. So that will be like a whole institution approach, a whole business, a whole university, a whole institution or organization. The third one is building the capacity of educators and trainers themselves. And I want you to think of yourselves, each one of you, as an educator. Right? And fourthly is working with youth, empowering, getting them to be able to address the issues and not only they're facing now, but what is likely coming in the future. And fourthly, this is the main one for us where we want to discuss, and that is how to come up with building more sustainable communities, accelerating sustainable solutions at the local level. Now, key in this, in the group that has been asked to take the lead role at the UN in this fifth priority action area, is the United Nations University and their program on regional centers of expertise. So this is a program that has been going since 2005, and it is spread around the world. It's a huge experiment on how can working with those four areas of public awareness, understanding, of training, of making school systems more relevant, the information, what is taught in schools, more relevant to a sustainable future. How can we use that in a networked way to build more sustainable communities? The goals are to enhance public awareness and understanding, to improve the quality of well-being, which you're already doing, and so hence why we've selected OMSSA and this as a huge opportunity or experiment, let's say, to move from, I come from Espanola, so to move from a small little northern town to the UN and have a voice and an influence there. To recognize and promote the role of people in sustainable development practices, including how to just begin to shift behavior and to shape shape learning opportunities. We have 136 of these regions around the world. There are 6 in Canada, stretch right across Canada, and we have one, Greater Sudbury, in Ontario at the moment. Now, this is a map. You probably can't read the cities on it, but it just shows you sort of the distribution of these around the world. A couple of weeks ago, I was with the folks in Beijing, and so they are struggling, trying to figure out how do you build a more sustainable Beijing. You know, huge issues with China, but they are taking it extremely seriously. They've put this into their national 5-year plan. They have built 1,000 special ESD schools to try and experiment. What does it mean to change our education system, et cetera? So don't feel alone. There are people working at the local and community level all over the world. Now, this is the one that I love. I think this is the clearest slide of all, and I'm coming close to wrapping up. What we envisioned, this whole idea came, as I was saying, as many good things. It came from a beer in a pub in Prague, where the rector of the United Nations University and I were sitting and totally kind of down. The more beer we drank, the more down we became, as sometimes happens, about the lack of progress. And we decided, let's really work at the community level. And the idea came just bang, bang, bang. How do we bring together 2 big groups? How do we bring together the messengers with the people who know what are the social, environmental, and economic issues facing the community now and what's coming? And how do we get current, relevant, up-to-date information into the hands of the messengers? How can we revitalize and improve just not only the school systems, but the community service people and so on, so that young people will be able to see what are the big issues and learn math, language, science, history, geography through dealing with current programs. But it was also about how can NGOs, how can the community service groups, et cetera, get accurate information into the hands who are wonderful allies. If you want to know more about parenting, I mean, that should be in our health programs. But oftentimes, I was superintendent of curriculum in the Toronto Board of Education when we brought in the gay, lesbian, and bisexual curriculum. I'll show you the stripes and scars on my back at some point. But the only way we were able to even build that curriculum was working out in the community with faith-based groups and with the medical community and so on, and how to in-service it and get it into the schools so that the teachers themselves, who hadn't a clue in most cases, how could we get accurate information into their hands so that we didn't deliver the misguidings that already existed in the teachers. So this is the model that we put out, but no one model fits all. And what is so exciting is that here with OMSSA, we're looking at a way of perhaps building a bigger OMSSA-wide, provincial-wide kind of service center, and then local groups who will implement things in different ways. What is so neat about that is that OMSSA can get to the ear of the ministry. See, most towns and cities who are trying this, they can't get beyond fixing things with their own mayor and their own community. And what is holding them back is provincial, state, federal policies. But here what we see is perhaps there's a way, if we had a number of regional smaller groups working and learning, that through OMSSA we would be able to take and become, instead of grovelers, advisors, and be able to shift policy, and from there move to a federal and beyond. Okay? So that's where I hope that we will be able to go. So the idea is to move and experiment at the local level, because what fits in Rainy River is quite different than what fits in downtown Toronto. Right? So we need tremendous flexibility, but with a core message. And so there are many different levels what is going on. In some places it's simply events, others it's learning about community sustainability issues. In others, what we want to do is to raise it to the level where the idea of well-being becomes a tactic and becomes embedded. And then the highest level is that regional center of expertise level that we're talking about, where it's embedded in the community goals and policy, and many, many different groups are using it. So you're engaging the conservation authorities, the healthcare, and other NGOs, faith-based groups, and so on. Now, the key thing that we mentioned is this idea of a strengths model, and building the idea that no one group controls it all, but every group can contribute something. But to move forward, we need someone with the vision and the backbone to politely and engagingly stand up and invite people to join to have discussions. How can we build together? What is the vision in our community? Let's do an analysis. What are the things that we need to tackle first? Who do we need to have together, and will you work together and share and work on that? And eventually then what we need, through proving some success, is to get the resources. We can prove what we can do and build a structure so that we can work in that collaborative way. The idea, though, is how do all of our communities have all the bits and pieces, or many of the bits and pieces, but they remain bits and pieces unless we can assemble them. And suddenly, instead of a pile of individual parts, people doing things, we're able to create something that will take us somewhere into a more sustainable future. And I really hope that there will be some groups within OMSSA who will help to build this and to take us forward. Thank you very, very much.